All right, welcome to the kissfaq podcast. I want to shout it loud at some more clouds today because the board's having a meltdown, and I've been online on Facebook, and it's the 50th anniversary of Kiss Alive today, September the 10th. It's also Joe Perry's birthday for Aerosmith fans who need an excuse to celebrate that band. But just thinking about the Alive meltdown, no, there's not been an announcement yet of any potential Kiss Alive box set. And so what? I'm back to thinking about some of the potential things that I think should happen in 2026, or more appropriately, I guess, could happen. Again, it's just the opportunity for me to do a stream of consciousness on potential product. We've seen a lot of great unofficial box sets over the years. I would love to see more coming in an official way. Partially to legitimize some of those videos and recordings which are known to exist and in many cases have circulated as bootlegs, so unofficial releases, over the years. In my last episode, looking at 2026, I obviously focused on two of the most important things, Rock and Roll Over box set, and what I think is also critically important, the Destroyer Spirit of 1976 live box. For these ones today, or at least one of them, it's too late. The amount of time that it takes, I think, to put a product together would never happen in time for Kiss Alive, the tail end of it, and that's January 1976. The 3 shows at Cobo Hall in Detroit. It was, part of the band's first major multi-date engagement in a city. It's in the heartland of history. And to a certain extent, we've already had, the second night released in its entirety on Kissology Volume 1. While the first night, at least part of it, without the encores, was used as a Best Buy bonus disc on one of the versions of that release. And parts of the third night, of course, have also been used on various releases over the years. Andrew and I did, I think, an Inner Sanctum episode where we dug into some of the details and minutiae about Cobo. So do check that video out separately, because I'm not going to be going into that amount of detail for this feature. It would make a nice bookend, in my mind, to the Alive 50th anniversary and the transition into the 50th anniversary of Kiss Destroyer. A 3, video and or souped-up audio recording, a celebration of that stand in their entirety, which obviously we have from the leaks that happened a couple of years ago, complete versions of all 3 of those shows now, and they could be tweaked. Aerosmith has done wonderful work to their video recordings of the Summit in 1977, and hopefully we'll do the same for Pontiac 76, which is an amazing show in its own right. But getting back to Kiss and not getting too distracted with tangents, an accompanying book, that whole week and the week surrounding the Cobo shows was a very important time in history for, passing the baton between 2 album eras in some ways. Starting looking at their schedule for that week, on the 22nd, they had a rehearsal at Carroll's. Then they left for Erie via jet charter, where they performed a show. There was a makeup event in Erie, and then they went to Detroit by charter, where they arrived. Now, everyone's seen the video footage of Kiss arriving in Detroit on the jet. It was featured, I think, in Rock Scene and Cream magazines, as well as elsewhere. So there was a press conference at Detroit with assortment of press, radio, TV, and whatnot present for that. I don't know what was discussed specifically at that press conference. I can't remember if I've seen footage of it. I get confused between that and the Destroyer ones. But again, taking the pictures that we know, or the photos that were taken, and putting them in a book with the narrative, as has been done for other product, I think would be a very appealing product. Again, personal taste. If you're not interested, you've probably already clicked off and I'm talking to clouds. On the afternoon of the 25th, they did a sound check at Cobo. Further sound checks on the 26th, and then according to this schedule, I'm not a photo expert, so I'm going to go strictly off this. they did the photo session on the bikes with Finn Costello. I don't know if that's accurate, so someone punch into the comments details on that. And then obviously they performed that night. 27th, again, third night. We've got the shows now, and I think they're all passable. And maybe any faults, technical faults with the media could be fixed. It'd be nice to have 21st century transfers if the original media is still available. There are some great stories about this visit. I think the tapes from the engagement went missing in a limo and were held to ransom at one point for payment or something or some such. Again, check out that video I did with Andrew to see if we talked about it there. And then, of course, at the end of the Cobo engagement, they went back to New York, where they had the airing of the Destroyer tapes. So that's the handover. But around the 24th, that's where it's all at. There should be a mini documentary done for that event itself, just a standalone, highly focused, highly constrained. Just, again, celebrate those 3 shows. I've been listening to those today to celebrate Kiss Alive, along with, I think, Wilkes-Barre, September the 14th audience recording. I'll probably dig into some other stuff while I work as well. So I think the Cobo era would be very worthy of a box treatment. It's, again, probably had it unofficially. I don't keep track of the bootlegs these days, just because that's never been my thing to buy bootleg packages. I will happily listen to the recordings, but I don't care about all the hotkeys. But in the case of an official product, if one was feasible, possible, a 3 whatever video package, or even the audio. Again, we did see with Tokyo 2001 that proper treatment of audio could transform the original experience that we had. So even as an audio-only release, if they have those recordings available, or are even able to do something with the video sources. And I know that when I spoke about doing Ladies in Waiting on the show the other day for the 50th anniversary episode on Kiss Alive, I'd had problems with the quality of the audio. So, again, it may not be possible, but it's something that I would like to see. The other product for 2026 is 1981, is the 45th anniversary of Music from the Elder. I'm still fixated by the Elder. It's somewhat of a touchy subject, but the Odyssey project and book was really only the starting point for me into a much deeper dive into elements of the Elder. And I think it's time to think about that album's super deluxe treatment, because I think waiting for the 50th anniversary is going to be a bridge too far. There's a couple of things that make this appealing to me as a 45th anniversary. Number one, Destroyer was a 45th anniversary, and that's the other Ezrin album of note, more so than Revenge. Sorry, Revenge fans. It just doesn't have the same importance to me, though I know other fans, such as some of my podcast buddies, will disagree vehemently and now blacklist me for that comment, but whatever. You get the obvious obligatory remaster of The Elder. That's fine and dandy. I think they could do two: a remaster of the international version, a remaster of the earlier mix, aka the Japanese version, and Atmos treatments of both, which could be quite interesting or revealing, especially if Bob Ezrin is doing that himself. Bob Ezrin. Now, I've not been a big fan of Destroyer Resurrected. I listened to it a few times. It was interesting when it came out, but it's not something that I've regularly gone back to. Yeah, the Sweet Pain demo was very cool. But I would love for him to go back and revisit The Elder. The Elder Resurrected would be a fascinating treatment, especially if he had access to material that perhaps is not in Universal's vault and was able to bring a lot of the additionally recorded elements that are perhaps buried in the mix or left on the cutting room floor back into play with the original track sequence, the original audio or spoken word narrative that was most certainly recorded Again, we have the interviews from the Odyssey book and the script for what was recorded. There's not a whole lot that was recorded, but I'd love to see him put it back together and perhaps address some of Ace's criticisms. Now, Ace has said that Bob got rid of a whole bunch of his solos, didn't use his work. Now, whether that is accurate or misremembering or perhaps projecting onto the album and the era, something that did not happen, it would certainly be interesting to see what Bob finds on those multi-tracks. As has been the case on Destroyer Resurrected, there was material that was lowered to the point of not being audible for Destroyer that Bob was able to bring a little bit more into the forefront with his tastes decade on. So I would very much be interested in that. The voice sessions, obviously, the spoken word sessions are critically important to the story, and so little did make it onto the final album as it was released. Ace's solos, if any, actually do exist. Are there, then just going into the regular album stuff, are there alternate takes? Well, we've seen multiple 2-inch reels. There must be multiple takes. That's just the nature of the business. Are there any interesting alternate takes of material that was cut that would certainly be worth listening to? I'd be interested in hearing, any songs that developed from one starting point and ended up completely different. As we've heard some of the work tapes for Escape from the Island and how it started and how it ended. That's an interesting story to follow the best and most complete version, because not all of those takes were complete, of course. So is there similar for other songs? There's an untitled instrumental that was on the end of one of those. It does have a title, but I'm not a leaker. And then we get into the stuff that was recorded. They used the Ace in the Hole, material on the Creatures of the box set because it was revisited. Now, does that mean that they can't reuse that? I would like it still packaged on an Elder box set, simply because that is its purpose. That is what it was recorded for originally, even though they later went back and reconsidered it or included it amongst material being considered for the project that ultimately became Killers and then Creatures of the Night. So that needs to be there. Ace in the Hole is critical. That's the first recordings with Eric Carr. Second recordings with Eric Carr, Phase 1, May 1981. There's 5 instrumentals that were recorded there. They do not have vocals as far as I'm aware. They are quite different than the rehearsals for those sessions that do circulate. So again, just like Ace in the Hole, you get demos, and then you get more final demos or higher level demos recorded in a studio. So get as much as that on and the best quality for those. Again, pick the best of the 3 takes. There are a couple that Ace had done solo overdubs for. Maybe that's what he's talking about for Ace's missing solos. Well, the whole songs were missing too, Ace. So that's already basically an extra CD or 2 of material on top of remasters and resurrected. So you're already well on your way to having a very viable box set, a super deluxe treatment. There are quite a few additional Ace jams which don't circulate whatsoever, but could be used, especially if they could be treated properly in order to enhance the quality of them. Ace wasn't doing nothing. That's an important thing to remember. There is a narrative that Ace was completely disassociated from this project. Well, he went to Toronto. He worked on material separately. It didn't make the grade. If it ever gets released, you'll understand why. But he didn't walk away from it and not try. He did try. Whether it was half-assed or half-hearted really doesn't matter. But it didn't work within the context of where the story was taking the musicians. So respect to Ace. I like to see more of Ace's story around the Elder told, because, again, I think he's a little bit hard done by his own memories of the time and the party line or narrative that seems to be somewhat firmly established. All right, so we've talked about most of the sessions that we know about. Obviously, there's a ton that we don't know about. We know of other demos. We know of Don't Run. We know that was cut sometime before the Kiss Army newsletter came out in, I think, April 1981. There are certainly real boxes of that into August at Ace in the Hole and one of the Californian Producers Workshop. Trying to do this with no notes is real fun. But Gene, I think, has mentioned Reputation, and there may be one or two others that we've kind of heard about. Well, let's put them back into the context of where they belong in terms of the story. I'd like to see a transformational story, multiple versions of Don't Run becoming Dark Light. I like to hear any alternate solos from which a final comp were constructed. So around that element, there's plenty of room. Did Paul try and do solos for any of the other songs? I'd love to hear different vocal takes. What about Gene singing Odyssey? Yeah. So there's more than enough material to do a 5, 6, or even more CD set. Talk about Fridays. We know there's a tape of the 3 songs being rehearsed. I only missed getting that ever so slightly, and someone did get it, and they have it. Well, pay the guy, and get that onto the box set so that they can be included along with the audio from the Friday's rehearsal, where you've got the embellishment of the house keyboard player on that performance, and you do have Ace punching in a solo of some description. Again, it helps tell the story of the Elder, and that's the only contemporaneous live stuff that's worth including. Whether you go and pull some of the interview stuff from the promotion of the album and include that, I don't know if that works. But musically, if it's music only, again, there's way more than enough. All right. I probably missed a whole lot of things while just steaming through that. Both of those topics, again, potentially a Cobo Alive box and music from the Elder. Super Deluxe Edition would be 2 more of my picks for 2026 potential treatment. What are your thoughts on these? Let me know in the comments.